School children count the seconds passing in a darkened classroom because the fluorescent overhead lights have been turned off. Large wooden windows are propped open with stacked books to manage the heat and stuffiness of the room. Memories of summer, late nights, and freedom haunt the children as they stare out at the beckoning sun. It's hard to adjust to being back in school when the weather is so nice. The school bell rings. Everyone flees unwilling incarceration. Most kids ditch their books and backpacks and rush to the river. Some kids lounge along the rocks dipping their feet in shallow pools while others challenge their courage by jumping from the old railway bridge. The water is woefully shallow, but somehow, for generations, no one has been seriously injured. Jack Newsom tries to ignore his rambunctious classmates as he longingly walks by. He lingers as he passes the storefronts of Central Avenue. Since the divorce of his parents and their relocation to this neighborhood, Jack's mother Linda has taken on a second job to help make ends meet. His older sister Alexis stays after school most days for club meetings, leaving Jack unsupervised. An arrangement was made for Jack to wait after school at his mother's brother David's house. David met Sandy a few years ago and she recently invited him to move in with her and her teenage son Desmond. Desmond makes Jack uncomfortable. As Jack turns onto Pine Street, he sees a police car parked in front of an elderly woman's house. The officer is trying to leave as she calls out, "I'm telling ya, others are saying it too." A peeping Tom is peeking in everyone's windows. Bet he's breaking in now. The officer has already heard all of this. As he opens his car door, her husband shouts, "We're missing some sleep medicine too." The officer sighs and gets into his quiet patrol car, and leaves. He takes a long look at Jack as he passes by. The house Uncle David is staying at is modest, could use a paint job and the grass is overgrown. A privet hedge lines the driveway and blocks the view of the house when coming down the street. As Jack reaches the property something catches his eye across the street. Then, in a sudden burst, he's struck with an immense force. Jack falls hard along the edge of the driveway. He looks up and standing over him is Desmond, smirking. Desmond's face never changes. He always has an arrogant, smug, devious, and self-loathing half-mouthed grin on his face. Even when he's eating. It's like he hates the food and can't wait to crush it with his teeth. Jack looks up at Desmond and says, "Why'd you do that?" "Suck it up, Buttercup." Jack gets up slowly. He's told his mother about Desmond, but her response has always been the same, "It's just for a few months. We're all making sacrifices." Desmond says, "Dave's not here." "Where is he?" Desmond doesn't reply. He steps away from the hedge, leans out toward the street, and peers up at the neighbor's house. "Saw a cop up there." "What's going on?" "How should I know?" "Hear anything when you walked by?" Jack did, though he says, no, he finds it best to only engage with Desmond as minimally as possible. Jack starts to walk to the house. "Where do you think you're going?" "Inside, to start my homework." "No, you're not. Mom's not home either." So, you can sit on the porch." "But I'm thirsty." "We got a hose." Jack reluctantly settles on the porch. It's dank and dingy and smells of old trash. Jack wipes a few pine needles from the step, sets his backpack next to his feet, unzips his backpack, and pulls out a textbook and notepad. He's determined to get his homework done as soon as possible. It's Friday night and if all goes to plan, his friend Theo will be sleeping over. Desmond lurks around the hedge line and then comes to the porch. Even though it's hot out, Desmond wears an oversized, hooded sweatshirt. The cuffs at the end of the sleeves are frayed and most of the time he has one of the hood strings between his teeth, slobbering and gnawing at it nervously. He plods around the porch aimlessly, tosses empty soda cans, and bangs the railing with a broken hockey stick. As he moves around there's an odd clacking sound that reminds Jack of the candy. Bored, Desmond tosses an old wet shoe at Jack and knocks his book out of his hands. "Cut it out," exclaims Jack. "What?" "I'm trying to get my homework done." "Why do you even care?" "It's just a waste of time. I didn't even go to school today." "Yeah, right. You're all talk." Desmond stood up quickly in defense. "I ditched." "What did you do then?" "I went to the arcade, hung around." Desmond smirks and says, "Did a little sightseeing." Jack looks at him in disbelief. "Sightseeing? Like what?" "The grease trap at the diner." Little more domestic than that. Desmond grows quiet and reflective. Jack turns to his books. He hears the sound again. He glances over and recognizes an orange medicine container. Desmond is discreetly studying the label. Before Desmond notices, Jack buries his face in his paperwork. Desmond abruptly gets up and grabs Jack's backpack and leans against the railing. "Give it back, Desmond." "Just looking for gum." "I don't have any." Desmond tosses Jack's backpack on the lawn and goes back to the corner of the porch. Things are quiet for a little while and then Jack's sister Alexis arrives. From the porch, Desmond calls out, "Hey, Lexi. What's up?" Alexis ignores Desmond and walks straight up to Jack. She says, "Let's go." "Wait, just finishing this last question." "What are you up to tonight?" asks Desmond. "Any parties or anything?" "I don't know." "Come on. You gotta get out more, Lex." Alexis never really looks at Desmond. Focused on Jack, she urges, "Come on, you can finish it later." Before Jack can protest, she snatches his pencil. Alexis grabs his backpack from the ground and nearly drags Jack off of the porch steps. No one says goodbye to Desmond. He follows them to the edge of the yard where he stops, exactly where he was standing when Jack had gotten there earlier in the afternoon, and stares down the street. It only takes a few minutes to get home. Jack fumbles around in the front pouch of his backpack, looking for something. "Where's your key?" asks Alexis. "Don't know, can't find it." "Mom's gonna kill you. Move." Alexis opens the door with her key. Jack rushes in, drops his backpack on the kitchen table, and hurries to the living room. Alexis searches the fridge for something to eat. Their mother should be home any minute. Jack cranks the air conditioner, turns on the stereo amplifier, and turns the volume. He drops to his knees in front of the television, turns it on, grabs a gaming controller, and flicks the switch to the console. The house vibrates. Dissatisfied with how long it's taking to cool the room, Jack plugs a fan into an electric outlet that is teeming with plugs. Seconds pass in windy glory and then the fuse blows. "When will you learn, Jack?" whines Alexis as she barges into the living room. "We gotta fix this before Mom gets home. She's under enough stress already. Quick, unplug the fan." Jack unplugs the fan and flings the cable angrily against the wall and follows Alexis to the laundry room. They shift cleaning supplies to unblock the fuse box. Alexis says, "It's time you learn how to fix this yourself." She shows Jack how the fuse switches work and how to reset them. "What's that big switch there at the top?" "It's the master switch, turns everything off." "Why would you do that?" asks Jack. "Oh, you know, if an electrician was fixing something, they might turn it off so they don't get electrocuted." "Ah. Oh, quick, Mom's back." The siblings quickly restore order and hurry into the kitchen. Their mother Linda comes through the door with a look of exhaustion on her face. She smiles softly when she sees them. Jack says, "Can Theo spend the night, and can we get pizza?" Linda is happy to be here. This house is starting to feel like a home now. The evening is lively and lovely. While Linda and Alexis snack on the couch watching, Jack and his friend Theo play a game they call. It's a hybrid game where they turn out all of the lights. The seeker seeks in the dark and tries to use his other senses to determine where the hider hides. The inspiration for the game comes from Jack's love of the comic hero, a blind vigilante. The phone rings and as Alexis heads to her room to take the call, Jack quietly whispers from his hiding spot, "Lexi, want to play?" She shakes her head. "Come on, you're the best. It's like you know how to vanish." Alexis leans down and says, "It's not about hiding, the secret is to keep moving undetected." She leaves Jack with his blown mind, then Theo pops out from behind a bookcase and proclaims, "Found ya." The friends migrate to the living room to watch and unsettle their stomachs with snacks. Around midnight, Jack's mother guides the boys up to his bedroom. Exhausted, everyone soon falls asleep. In the morning, Alexis is the first to rise and the first thing she sees is that her dresser's top drawer is open. She doesn't remember leaving it that way, and as she gets up to close it she notices a few photos on the floor. She affixes them to a collage on her wall and senses a photo from when she sunbathed by the river is missing. As she makes her way downstairs she smells fresh cut grass and hears the neighbor's lawnmower roaring. The front door is ajar. In the kitchen, she sees a few open cupboards. The swear jar on the counter is empty. Alexis runs upstairs and wakes her mother. Linda hides the intrusion from her son and directs him to accompany Theo on his walk home. She calls the police and pokes around to see what is out of place. Officer Dow arrives and soon after David, Sandy and Desmond show up. Linda and Sandy sit at the dinner table while Dave stands leaning against a kitchen counter. As Officer Dow finalizes his report, Desmond, nosing around in the living room, says, "Hey, didn't you guys have a small wooden owl on the shelf here?" Linda hurries into the living room and confirms the missing owl. She says, "Why would anyone take this? It has no value, other than sentimental." "Mrs. Newsom, the report's done." "I added the owl," interjects Officer Dow. "Now, I don't suspect the thief will be back. Anyway, we'll have an officer parked out front tonight." "Thanks." Officer Dow leaves. Sandy notices Linda massaging her temples. She asks, "Are you okay?" "Yeah, just have a migraine. I'll take something for it later." David excuses himself and uses the downstairs bathroom. Desmond says, "You guys got a second bathroom upstairs, right?" Linda nods. Alexis passes the upstairs bathroom on her way to her bedroom and believes she hears the medicine cabinet mirror close. After Desmond leaves, she inspects the medicine cabinet and doesn't see anything out of place. She waits upstairs for her uncle, Sandy, and Desmond to leave. When she finds her mother in the kitchen, Linda says, "Let's keep this between us for now. As far as I know, Jack doesn't know what happened last night. Probably better to leave him in the dark for now." "Okay, Mom." Alexis skips going to the library and keeps her mother company for the afternoon. Jack's excited when he gets home and learns that they are ordering out again for dinner. The family enjoys Chinese food and the antics of. Before bed, Linda double-checks all the doors and windows and draws the shades and curtains closed. She checks on the kids and takes one last look out of her bedroom window. She sees an officer parked out on the street in an unmarked car. Before climbing into bed, she takes some aspirin to combat her lingering headache. The officer parked in front of the Newsom residence rubs his eyes and takes a sip of sickly cold coffee. He glances around and wishes something would happen, like a raccoon toppling over a garbage can. The sky is abnormally dark as thick clouds threaten rain. He's suddenly startled when an announcement comes over his speaker. The officer calls in, starts his car, and excitedly speeds off. From the woods near where the patrol car was parked comes a dark figure who purposely crosses the street undetected. At the Newsom residence's front door, he quietly inserts a key into the deadbolt lock, releases the bolt, enters, and closes the door behind. The house is darker than it was the night before, but the ambient light from the microwave and stove clocks, the DVD player and strategically placed nightlights illuminate the house nicely. The intruder fearlessly looks over the Newsom's things, pockets a video game cartridge, removes the DVD and replaces it with, and moves wall frames around. He playfully ascends the stairs to the second floor and peeks in on Jack, who lies tangled up in his blankets. In Linda's room, the intruder boldly thrashes her bed. She jostles around but remains asleep. The commotion wakes Jack. He quietly skulks into the hall and peers into his mother's room. He catches the intruder as he peels down Linda's blankets and studies the curves of her body. He removes a locket from her neck and pockets it. Jack unwillingly gasps. Before he's seen by the intruder, he dashes to his nearest hiding place, a tight space between the wardrobe and the hall. The intruder pops out into the hall, looks around, and sees nothing. He realizes he's running out of time. Jack watches the intruder remove a roll of duct tape from his oversized hooded sweatshirt's pocket and enter Alexis's room. Jack quietly moves to Alexis's door, and as he glances in, he sees the intruder quietly fingering through Alexis's underwear drawer. Horrified, Jack silently descends the stairs and dashes into the kitchen. He grabs the phone and ducks into the walk-in pantry. He dials 911 and waits impatiently. When the operator answers, he quietly declares his address and that there is someone in the house. He doesn't wait for a response. He leaves the pantry, opens the refrigerator door, and places the phone receiver in the fridge. He hears the operator telling him to stay on the line, and once he closes the door there is silence. Jack races through the kitchen and into the laundry room. As he strains to clear the fuse box, he knocks over a tin container which causes an alarmingly loud crashing sound. Jack hears the intruder run to the top of the steps. He hears Alexis scream as she wakes and sees the intruder. Jack cries out, "Vanish," then he flips the house's master breaker switch and cuts off all the power to the house. All the ambient lights die. The dark skies, drawn blinds, and cut power plunges the house into absolute darkness. The intruder turns and lunges for Alexis, but she rolls out of bed and hits the floor hard. He claws for her, but she crawls around the base of the bed frame. Her natural inclination is to wake her mother, but her intuition tells her to duck into Jack's room. The intruder rushes into Linda's room but can't find Alexis there. In haste, he bangs into the doorframe and stumbles into Jack's room. Alexis crouches in a corner and listens as the intruder scuffs his feet along the carpet. When he bashes his shin against Jack's bed frame, Alexis traces the wall in the darkness and reaches the doorway. Sirens wail through the neighborhood. Panic overtakes the intruder. Alexis closes Jack's bedroom door. At the top of the steps, she whispers, "Jack." In the darkness, she hears, "I'm here. Quick, help me move this." Jack follows the handrail and finds his sister's hand in the darkness. She says, "Pull, and I'll push." Alexis and Jack slide a low table with shelves lined with books in front of the staircase. The intruder bumps into Jack's bedroom door and paws for the doorknob. Jack instinctively climbs over the table and descends the stairs. The door opens before Alexis can flee. Counterintuitively, she sneaks past Jack's door and hides in the corner. The intruder stumbles from Jack's room in the direction of the staircase. He bumps into the table and fumbles around, moving further down the hall. He knocks frames from the wall, and when Alexis hears him bump into the wardrobe, she moves to and climbs over the table and meets Jack at the bottom of the stairs. The intruder continues to frantically claw around looking for the staircase. He's consumed by the need to get out of the house. There is a loud knock against the door. An officer calls out, "It's the police." The officer turns the knob and opens the door. Beams of light shoot into the living room, and when the responding officers enter, they see Alexis and Jack shielding the flashlight beams from their eyes. Jack points to the staircase. The officers find the intruder, Desmond Whitman, cowering behind the curtain in the bathtub. "So, what's the catch?" Bastian, towering leader of the heroic Aegis team, asked, reclining behind his desk as much as his high-backed chair would allow. "Excuse me." Artemis detected a note of accusation in his tone. Her bow and quiver rested upon the wide marble surface between them, next to Bastian's blue, articulated mask. "What does she want?" Bastian persisted. "My job." "Yours?" "Perhaps a vision craft, or vision cycle." His lip curled into a wry half-smile. "For her vision quests." Artemis snickered despite herself. "Boss, maybe ease up on the brand stuff a little." "Mantle stuff," Bastian corrected, preferring the industry term. "But, back to my original question, what's the catch? Why did she agree to do this for me?" "Because you're her boss." Her boss," he interrupted. "And you asked nicely," Artemis explained. "I did. On behalf." "Artemis." Bastian leaned forward, revealing a small tear in the fabric of his uniform, just below his massive left pectoral. He took care with his injured arm. "Please, do not make me ask a third time." Artemis sighed deeply. She then slid the cowl from her head, the fleeting shadow revealing a smear of black face paint and glassy, reddening eyes. "The catch," she repeated. "You dispatched your lieutenant to cajole our resident clairvoyant into revealing the exact date and time of your demise." Artemis spat the last word as though it tasted sour on her tongue. "And you're wondering about a catch?" There's a catch, but not in the way that you're thinking. I didn't have to her anything." "Explain." Artemis shook her head. "She did it because." "Right. There's always a because." Bastian arched an eyebrow. "But we'll get back to that. You said a catch, but not in the way I'm thinking. You are a great many things, boss, but simple-minded has never been one of them." Bastian's eyes narrowed. "Knowing when you die," Artemis said, fists shaking. "That, Bastian, is a burden that no man was meant to bear. Not even one with shoulders as broad as yours. Why on earth would you? To know. I do not fear death, Artemis. None of us do. We're superheroes, for heaven's sake. I don't even have powers. No, we don't fear death, nor do we chase it. Bastian relaxed. A smile split his face. A, you don't. Powers, Artemis. And B, I am not. Death. Then what are you doing? Why do you want this information? I need it. I need to know. She sunk into her seat and dragged a gloved palm down her face, streaking paint. To borrow a line from you, Bastian, please don't make me ask a third time. Bastian tilted his head and stared into her eyes, his gaze all but devouring hers. Dr. Woe brought us to our knees, Artemis. Dr. Woe is in the box, she countered, referring to the specially designed maximum security prison that detained their enhanced adversary. Because we got lucky. Bastian shouted, almost pleading. Because we're the Aegis, Bastian. We saved the day, as we always do. This time was different, Bastian explained, sighing and breaking eye contact. Dr. Woe took a sledgehammer to the rules of engagement. There were rules. With. Since when, boss, and why had no one told me? Artemis. Donner is dead. Blitzen, grieving, on indefinite hiatus. We're all grieving. Artemis felt the weight of their losses as profoundly as he, and took offense at the notion that she needed such things explained to her. Except. Probably hung her cape up for good. Visionaries in a coma, it's a minor miracle you got the information from her before she succumbed to her injuries. He slammed his good fist upon the desktop. My arm is in a sling, Artemis. We're wounded, yes. We'll need time to heal. But heal we will. And be all the stronger for it because, by God, we are Aegis. A coy smile found its way back to his angular features. Needs to take it easy with the mantle stuff again. Artemis ignored the dig. What will this knowledge do for you, Bastian? Plenty. Such as? He studied her for a moment. It will give me a window. I'm not thinking about the end. I'm considering the journey. Never took you for a poet, she said in a whisper, punctuating her snark with a defiant eye roll. Life is a song. Bastian needled. I need to know how much time I have left to fortify what we've built. Artemis raised an open palm to discourage further comment. Not sure what you mean, but we'll table those details for a moment. What difference does it make exactly? If you knew you had another 100 years, you'd kick your feet up, take your time. That's crap, it doesn't matter. We got our asses handed to us, and you can't let that stand. I'm with you on that. Starting here, right now, we put in the work to ensure that we're never caught. Isn't enough. No matter the strength of their conviction. Works harder with a gun to their head. Not you. The Bastian I know would just crush the gun. You're invulnerable anyway. He indicated his bandaged left arm with his chin. Really can't make that claim anymore, Artemis. Bastian, you're to die. We all are. Eventually. The gun's inherently there already, let that be your motivation, she said. Not much of a threat, if I know I've got another 6 or 7 decades before the trigger's pulled. But in not knowing, you'd be a fool to count on 6 or 7 decades. You've got to. It could be pulled within the next 5 minutes, and respond accordingly. It isn't the same. It should be. Bastian drummed the desktop with the fingers of his good hand. It isn't just that. The amount of time I have left will inform the scope and complexity of how we proceed. Artemis considered his words. Am I to take that to mean that you've been holding back up this point? Of course not. But things have changed. To do more. Bastian. Artemis counted her breaths for a moment. I suffered a concussion, you sprained your arm. But visionary? 3 fractured ribs, and she lost her leg. The gravity of her injuries was a spray of ice water to his face. I hadn't realized her injuries were that. I pushed and pushed, until finally, she delivered what I asked for. What? Asked for. Point being, maybe. Caused her to slip into the coma. Dr. Woe is the cause, and that's the point. The Is that I badgered her into crossing a line she swore she never would, and the reasons you're giving for why you asked me to do what I did smell like bullshit. You forget yourself, Artemis. I forget nothing. I obtained something that you, with all your might, could not. You asked about a catch. How's this for one? I'll give this to you, to do with as you wish. She extracted a thin, folded card from her pocket and closed her hand over it. In exchange for the truth. I could just take it from you. But you won't. I'm not just your second in command, not just your friend. I am your legacy. You. Me, Artemis, and for that, I would follow you through all 7 circles of hell. You'll give me the truth not because I coaxed it out of you, but because you know I deserve it. Bastian shifted in his seat. Bastian. Talk to me. I've never lied to you, Artemis. Never. You're the one. None of the others, none could handle the hard truths I face every day in this role. Except you. Artemis said nothing. But a lie by omission would still constitute a lie, Bastian said, more to himself. I suppose I have been lying to you. She remained stoic. I've met someone, Bastian continued with an unfamiliar apprehension. Fallen in love. That's great. But what's that got to do with? Bastian's eyes wandered. Who? Artemis pressed. Silence. Who? She. Bastian gave nothing away. Is it A? His exasperated eyes found hers again. Tell me, Artemis insisted. It doesn't matter. She, oh my God, Artemis said, understanding. She's a civilian. Listen to me. You're dating a civilian. No civilian attachments, Bastian. That was. Rule. I've given myself to Y, your mission, and you defy your bylaws and have me badger visionary into submission because you picked up a civilian girlfriend? I didn't plan it. Or avoid it. Leslie, Bastian began, jarring her with the use of her given name. I'm sorry. Artemis' eyes, lanterns in a field of black, burned. After too many seconds, she shrugged. The heart wants what it wants, as they say. She chewed her bottom lip. Tell me about her. This enchanting woman whose charms led you to break all the rules. Not the rules. Just one big rule. Bastian brightened. She's a barista. 27. She lost her mother to ovarian cancer a few years ago, and her father to riot. The anarchist. Bastian nodded. She's putting herself through law school. To join our fight. A cape. Not all heroes wear them, Artemis teased, still angry. Don't. I need freedom of movement. No powers, remember. Bastian drew himself to his full-seated height. You have the vision of an eagle, and the surest shot of any being, human, meta, or other, on this globe. Along with a pretty solid roundhouse. Artemis rolled her eyes. You're also one of only 2 people who know of the chink in my armor. He touched a hand to the rip in his costume, and the purple, blistering welt at the center of it. I wish to God I didn't. Contingencies, Artemis. In case I were ever to go dark, she finished for him. Yes. You wouldn't. Ever. The icon did, Bastian challenged. Used his knowledge of my vulnerability against me too. That's not fair. This was Dr. Woe's doing. She'd never much cared for the other veteran hero, but mind control by another represented the ultimate defense. The point is, I can bleed. And now the world knows. Has seen it. And we need to prepare. You feel exposed now. I get that. Artemis reached to grasp his resting hand. Welcome to my life, just flesh, blood, and a little resolve over here. But a sprain, an Achilles heel. These shouldn't worry you. Civilian attachments on the other hand. Major weakness. Some might argue a source of strength. Might argue that. Me. I prefer a bow and arrow. You. Fists. Strongest on the planet. Bastian chuckled. Think I'm the strongest? Icon softened in his old age. She shot him a wink. He's 42, Artemis. But an even bigger vulnerability would be an obsession with one's own death. Makes you fatalistic. Basing every move upon your own anticipated defeat. It sharpens focus. You say focus, I say tunnel vision, Artemis snapped. She's pregnant, Leslie. Her name is Nicole. And she's carrying my child. The words hit Artemis like a closed fist. I know I'm probably supposed to congratulate you, but I understand. Do you? Artemis asked, bruised. You let her in. She met me as a Christopher. But unless she's a moron, she's that your Bastion. Or, she. If you hadn't told her. Which you most certainly did before, inseminating her. Bastion couldn't argue this point. I need to know that I outlive Nicole's pregnancy. Beyond that, I want to know how much time I have to ensure my child has a fighting chance in this world. Artemis' lips smacked softly as they parted. Your child's best chance would be estrangement from its father. A father who should continue fighting to make this world safer for children. With whatever time he have remaining. I'm asking you, my dearest friend, my closest ally, and should I be so fortunate to receive your acceptance, godmother of my child, to honor our agreement. I gave you the truth, you give me that card. Or tell me what it says. Emotion choked Artemis' reply. I don't want to know what it says. What the hell makes you think? Looked at it. Bastion's brow furrowed. Why the tears? Because this is the end of us. You, the indomitable Bastion, are doubting yourself as a hero and leader. And worse, you're setting a timeline. You're looking to an end. I'm not. You are. And this is me, your dearest friend, closest ally, and yes, godmother to a baby whom I will love to death. This is me asking you to open this card. Artemis. Visionary doesn't share death dates. Ever. And why has she sworn a vow never to do so? Because the first and only time she'd ever done it before lead to disaster. Artemis laced her fingers together upon her lap. At first, she and her brother treated her burgeoning precognitive abilities like a game. Growing bolder with each new vision. Until she witnessed death. And after hours of his insistence, she shared a date and time. Within that very year. Why would she reveal? Because he was her brother. And they were young. And dumb. She didn't tell him the how, just the when. She at least had sense enough to withhold details. But it didn't matter. Knowing broke him. He grew depressive. Turned to alcohol and opiates, he lost all sense of self. And ultimately, he stumbled in front of an oncoming train. Bastion knew this part of Visionary's story. At the exact moment she'd predicted. Artemis winced. You see this knowledge as a resource. But what if? Sets things into motion. You'll die of cancer 5 years from now could be the very thing that saves your life. Isn't what kills most people, Artemis countered. And you're presuming an ability to change outcomes. Couldn't we? Artemis shook her head. Our singular test case says, no. I'm not looking to anything. I've accepted the fact that my eventual demise is inevitable. Which terrifies me more than Dr. Woe ever could. You're playing God. I'm being a father. Bastion. Knowing that we'll all eventually die gives our lives meaning. Knowing when is what gives us the freedom to make the most of our time. The world doesn't need a Bastion with a 5-year plan. Bastion swallowed hard and arched an eyebrow. I didn't look at the card, she insisted. The world, this team, Nicole, your child. We need a Bastion who's thinking long run. You're scared. So am I. But this is a crutch. An arbitrary security blanket. And heroes don't need blankets. We've got capes. Not you. Not me. Artemis shared a laugh with him. Holding your baby would be my joy. We can provide them a safer world. Together. Bastion's smile evaporated. He rotated his palm upward, which, based upon the set to his jaw, suggested he wasn't seeking her touch again. Numbly, Artemis deposited the folded card into Bastion's open hand. An eternal minute elapsed before he smiled again. He then crumpled and tossed the card into the wastepaper basket beside his desk. Without opening it. "Now, get out of here," Bastian ordered. "I want a full report on Visionary's condition. Blitzens, within the hour. I need to connect with the warden." "Of the box?" "Yes. I'd like to handle Dr. Woe's interrogation personally," Bastian explained. "Bleed him a little." "Artemis," he said, a warning in his tone. I know. Within the hour." "Copy." "And Bastian?" Artemis began, eyes dewy. "Thank you." She collected her gear, slipped the cowl over her head and departed, the door clicking softly as it closed behind her. Bastian nodded. He respected Artemis profoundly. But with so few assurances in life, and the uncertainty of Visionary's fate, ensuring his child's safety took precedence over all else. He plucked the card from the bin, and unfurled it slowly. The card simply read. Bastian's heart sank, as realization settled into his stomach. The shattering glass of his office door barely registered. But the arrowhead piercing the left side of his chest, between his fourth and fifth ribs, his armor's chink, monopolized his attention in an instant. Artemis' heavy, deliberate footfalls, only heard when she wanted to be heard, as she stormed back into his office commandeered his thinking from there. "Damn you, Bastian," Artemis roared, lowering her bow. Bastian's blood spurted through his clutching fingers. "Why? Visionary didn't tell me." "She wouldn't. Because she knew what I know. That knowing only leads to catastrophe." "Why?" Bastian asked again, his voice faint. "I love you. Always have, and always will. But you betrayed me. Your secrets are ours. You lead us, and now you've shared intel with A. That you had no right to share. Bad enough on its own. But you're giving up. Us, and I won't let that stand. I'm your legacy, and will represent you proudly. Words can't convey the depth of my heartbreak. Deeper still, because I'll now need to eliminate Visionary." Artemis leaned closer. "She's unconscious not because of a coma, but because of a powerful sedative. We don't yet know the full extent of her abilities, but she can't ever know or see what's happened here. For this, I am also sorry. Didn't. I'll be stopping for a coffee. Visiting Blitzen. My words are true, I'd love to meet Nicole, and to hold your child." Artemis' tears stormed. "Which is now a problem. Cannot have civilian attachments." She kissed her index and middle fingers and placed them to Bastian's lips, flecked with bloody spittle. "Rest easy, Bastian. The Aegis will rebuild. And carry on. The bunker should be this way." One man shouted as he led a group of about 8 people through the heavy snowfall. The year was 2591, and the world had been completely covered in snow and ice for over a century at that point. Why? No one could tell you. Over the years, snowfall began to become heavier and heavier, even covering places like the Sahara and Arizona in thick snow layers nearly year-round. The population had gone from a staggering 22 billion individuals to little more than 1 billion, and it was still dropping quick. With food supplies dwindling and the extreme temperatures, survival was a difficult task to put it lightly. "Where'd you hear about this bunker, anyway, Butch?" Another man yelled from the back of the group. They had bright red hair and a long neck beard. His hair fell in braids off the back of his head. He was blind in one eye, evident by his eye being whited out. In between the two individuals walking on the ground was a tall, futuristic-looking tank. Built out of rusted metal and even some wood, the machine plowed through the snow. On the top of the tank sat 3 women. One woman, wearing padded clothing, gloves, and her head was wrapped in goggles covering her eyes. Her mouth was the only exposed skin on her body. Her black hair stuck out from her head wrappings. On her back was a large nameplate that read, "Butch." "That man who came into the safe house 2 weeks ago who had survived the wolf attack told me." Butch answered. She was fiddling with a small flare gun she had strapped to her thigh. "I didn't believe him at first. A bunker with several years' supplies worth of food sounded too good to be true. The eye put KO on the case, and things seemed more plausible. KO, a young Asian woman with bright pink hair, less padded than Butch but still heavily clothed, sat next to a small garbage can fire on top of the tank. When her name was mentioned, she simply nodded. It does sound too good to be true. The red-headed man responded. This is a suicide mission, through and through. I cannot believe I let you guys talk me into going with you. Shut up, Roach. The man in the front of the group shouted back at the red-headed man. My wife and kids haven't had food for over 4 days. I'll do anything to bring them back some nourishment. We've been gone 2 days, Scott. Butch shouted down from the top of the tank. I pray they'll survive until we get back. I pray we survive. Roach mumbled. Wait. Scratch that. I don't pray. I refuse to pray, in fact, because any of those wretched gods that allowed this crap heap of a winter doesn't deserve my prayers. I thought you didn't believe in any gods. Scott asked. That is also why I won't pray. At some point, Roach, you'll realize that you're gonna have to fall back on someone other than yourself for survival. Butch said. And at that point, you may not have anyone left but a god. I'm the only person who's never let me down. Roach responded. Everyone rolled their eyes at Roach's comment. Anyway, based off of KO's estimates, we should reach the bunker within the next hour. Scott shouted to the group behind him. How do we know we've been going the right direction? The third woman asked from atop the tank. She was stick-thin with long blonde hair reaching down to her knees. She looked malnourished more than anything, with bones showing through her skin, and her eyes being sunken into her head. If the group hadn't known her for several years, they might have assumed she was the oldest among them. But they all knew Little Scrapper, the nickname the crew had given her, was far younger than any one of them. The man we heard the rumor from gave us basic directions. Butch answered. KO charted the area and found that a bunker did in fact exist within the range that the man had said. After that, it's a lot of faith. Blind faith. Roach muttered. After another 45 minutes of walking, the group could see ahead of them a formation. A man-made structure that was clearly the bunker they were looking for. I can't freaking believe. Roach whispered to himself. Good work, KO. Scott exclaimed. KO simply nodded. Wait a sec. Butch muttered. She stood up, revealing she was actually much taller and more muscular than she previously seemed, standing close to 8 feet tall. Guys, there's more than just a bunker there. The crew stopped and looked for a moment, realizing Butch was correct. There was not just a singular bunker there, but also a large city. A city? Scott confusedly asked. Nothing was ever said about a city. He never mentioned anything about it. Butch responded. KO, is it possible we lost track of where we're going and found something else? KO shook her head. Bunker here in city. I should have known better than trusting that freaking pink-haired little. Roach began shouting. Roach, shut up. Butch shouted back. She walked over to KO and placed her hand on the woman's shoulder. KO, do you know if the city is abandoned or not? Scott asked. If it's abandoned, our plans don't change. City inhabited. Great. Just great. Roach exclaimed. Well. Time to turn around, I guess. Why do you just assume this city won't try to help us? Scott asked optimistically. Maybe they'll give us some of their food. Because, Scott. It's a dog-eat-dog world now. Roach answered. I know you like to think we are still living in some sort of fantasy world where we're all in this together, but really, most of us are just in it for ourselves, being dragged out here to die in the snow because of people like you. I'm sorry that I'm trying to help other people that aren't me, Roach. Scott shouted back. I'm sorry that I want to help the human race maybe survive another century. If you two are done making a scene, I'd like to know what the plan is now. Butch calmly stated. I'm going in. Scott answered, not breaking his angry gaze from Roach. Maybe they'll help us out, at least to some extent. I'm going in, too. Butch responded. You're a good man, Scott, but a bad fighter. She winked at Scott. KO. Scrapper. I'm not gonna force you to do anything you don't want to do. You either wait out here or come in with us. Your choice. Scott explained. I'll come in with you. Scrapper answered. Roach creeps me out. Same. KO added. Good. Roach muttered. Means it's working. Okay, then. Scott continued. Roach. What are you gonna do? Roach thought for a moment, trying to figure out how best to answer. You guys are gonna freaking die in there. You don't know that, Roach. Butch responded. He nodded his head. I'd rather die in there than out here in the snow. Roach answered. I'm going in. When the crew pulled up to what seemed to be the front entrance of the city, Scott stood at the front of the group. The 5 people gathered together, all on the ground off of the tank, which they had left further back to keep from intimidating their potential help. The door in front of them was huge, standing at least 50 feet tall and 20 feet wide. The city stood as a massive closed-off dome made of stone. Scott was unclear of how to go about opening the door. Ko stepped in front of Scott and placed her hand on the door. In a moment, her eyes glowed pink, before the door opened. Nice one. Butch mentioned. Yeah. Let's just break into this city. Roach commented. That'll end well. As the door opened in front of them, 6 armed guards stood behind the entrance. In between the 6 guards stood a tall woman wearing a white suit. She had short, curly brown hair that extended to her chin. You are a crafty one, young android. The woman stated, staring straight at Ko. Good job opening our door. Great. We're gonna die. Shut up, Roach. Scott muttered. Hello. My name is Scott. This is my crew of scouts from Colony B 76 from the Upper East Territories. These are Ko, Butch, Roach, and Scrapper. What brings your crew here, Scott? The woman asked. We were informed of a bunker containing edible foods this way out of our colony. Scott explained. We came on the assumption it was abandoned, but now realize it is actually an inhabited city. We simply ask that if there are any portions you are willing to part with, we may have some for our people. While a nice request, our people do not so openly spread our food to outsiders. The woman responded. My husband, the prime president of this city-state, has made it clear that outsiders are not to. The woman paused, listening as someone spoke to her over an earpiece. She nodded. Yes, sir. She answered. She looked back up at Scott, then moved her eyes over to Roach. My husband has informed me he would like to meet you before sending you off. Please, come in. As the crew walked into the city, the doors closed behind them. Once they were completely shut, the guards each chose a particular member of the crew to stand by, with one covering the woman in white. I will have my maidservants prepare you a place to stay over the week, per my husband's request. The woman stated. Okay, listen here, Snow. Butch interjected. We're not staying a week. One night, maybe, but we've got families back at our colony who need food, and soon. My husband never said anything about gifting you food. The woman responded. He just wants to meet one of you. She looked straight at Roach. Me? Roach asked. Why me? The woman simply smiled, then turned around and continued walking forward. I don't like this. Roach whispered to Scott. I'm starting to agree. They were led into a large, open room full of people. While the woman leading them was dressed quite well, the people in this room were dirty, dressed in rags and covered in dirt. What is this place? Scrapper asked. This is where all of the people found in the wild stay waiting for clearance to enter into the city proper. The woman responded. Most have been here their entire lifetimes. Sad, but the prime president has his priorities. How is this any better than being out in the wild? Butch asked. We have heating. At the doorway at the end of the room stood a man wearing a blue suit. He had bright red hair, and a long, scruffy beard. Roach froze dead in his tracks. You've got to be kidding me. Roach whispered. As the man looked Roach in the eyes, he extended out his arms. Welcome home, younger brother. Oh, crap. Scott whispered. How long has it been? Roach's brother asked. What? Like 23 years or something like that? Not long enough. Roach answered. Come on, brother. Don't be like that. You sold me. Roach shouted. For what, Mark? A wife. Mark responded. She's still with me if that's any concern to you. She's my favorite out of my 5. He laughed smugly, while the woman in white had a slight look of shame come over her face. Screw you. Roach said. Let's go. I want nothing from this guy. Can't we talk this out? Mark asked. Don't you think I might have come to regret that over the years? Honestly, no. Listen, brother. Just stay the night. You and I can talk and get caught up on life. Mark continued. Tomorrow morning you can leave, and I'll send you off with plenty of food to last your colony months. Roach thought for a minute. He hated the idea of staying with his brother for more time than he wanted. But at the same time, he knew his colony needed food, and he didn't want this trip to be worthless. Fine. One night. Roach agreed. But first thing tomorrow, there better be food waiting for us to deliver home. Scott looked at Roach and mouthed, thank you. He had known Roach for a long time, and while the two did not always get along, he knew just how much Roach's family had hurt him. Good. You can stay in my quarters, brother. Mark explained. I'll make sure your friends have a safe place to stay as well. Roach and Mark arrived in Mark's living quarters about half an hour later. Upon arriving, Roach was disgusted at what he saw. 5 women all dressed in white gowns and with gold and blue paint over their faces. On their backs were written the words, the wives of Mark. Worse than I thought. Roach stated in a quiet tone. You're sick. What do they even do all day? That is, none of your business. Mark answered. I don't see why you're so resistant to me, brother. I'm trying to help. You are not trying to help, Mark. Roach responded. You're trying to get something from me. What you could possibly want from me, I'm not sure. I kinda suck. Is this what your life's become? Mark asked. I've had success while you and your little crew is struggle to make it day to day. Success, Mark. Is that what this is? You force women to love you so you can feel better about yourself while there are people in your own city starving because you are too arrogant to help them. You don't know the stuff I deal with every day to keep this city running. Mark shouted. I've seen pain and trauma you wouldn't believe. And I watched my daughter take her own life because it seemed better than my inability to provide for her. Roach shouted back. So shut up. I'm sorry, brother. Mark responded. I really am. Before Roach could continue, the woman in white stormed into the room. Sir. The giant, she broke into the locker and stole food. Crap. Roach thought. Butch. The 3 walked down to the large room they had been in earlier. In the center of the room was Butch surrounded by 3 guards who had Butch chained up. Chains. Really? Roach stated. Little overkill, don't ya think? Speak for yourself, giant. Mark shouted at Butch. First off, my name is Butch, not Giant. She answered. Secondly, the door was open, and people were walking in and out getting food as they please. Remember, I haven't eaten in 2 whole days. Listen, sir. We got some food too, so whatever you do to her should be done to us as well. Scott interjected. Mark ignored Scott. Non-citizens stealing from us is a grave offense. You will be punished greatly. Giants make for great slave labor, sir. The woman in white stated. Shall we condemn her to the mines? Agreed. Mark continued. I too feel that would best suit her. Holy crap. Roach muttered. I knew it. I knew all you wanted was to get something from me. You weren't gonna help us until you saw Butch. All you wanted was an excuse to get an extra slave for your city. Brother. Giants make for great slave labor. I'm sure you understand. Mark explained. She's my friend, Jack Wad. Roach shouted. Punishment must be served. This isn't punishment. You tricked us just so you could steal my friend as a slave. You wish to propose some sort of deal? Mark asked. Literally anything other than what you want right now. Mark and the woman in white paused to think for a moment. After some silence, Mark spoke. Kill them all. Take the giant. The guards instantly rose their weapons and aimed at the crew. They began open firing on them instantly. Ko was the first to be hit, but as an android she was able to withstand the shot more so than anyone else. Scott was shot in the back, falling over dead immediately. Roach looked for Butch but saw she had been taken out of the room right away and was gone before he knew it. He picked up Scrapper and began running with Ko by his side. They ran towards the exit they had come in, but the guards were too many. Ko continued to take the majority of the shots, but was able to withstand much of them, though even she was slowing down too. As they entered into the hallway where the exit was, Ko used her last moments to open the door. As the door began to open, she fell over dead, too. Roach and Scrapper were the only ones left and ran out the door as quickly as they could into the freezing snow. Mark and his guards stood at the door, this time with a larger weapon that would surely kill them. Roach was smart, though, and took Scrapper straight toward the tank they had left behind. They jumped in as quickly as they could and aimed straight at the doorway. Within a moment, Scrapper hit the button and shot a missile straight into the door, killing the guards, and presumably Mark, too. Roach and Scrapper sat for a moment, trying to catch their breath from what they had experienced. "What now?" Scrapper asked. Roach thought for a moment, partially concerned at how unaffected she was by this. He knew what she had experienced in her 13 years of life, and it horrified him. "We go back in for Butch," Roach answered. "Then we take some food back home." The wooden door creaked open, and Nora stepped out into the sun, the sand, the surrealism. The sand didn't vanish beneath her flip-flops, her bikini didn't blow away in the wind, and Dolores didn't melt into a puddle. She was definitely still there, with that frozen smile and those frosty eyes. "Oh, orange," said Dolores, eyeing Nora's bikini. "It took me a while to figure out my tones, too." Nora wrapped her towel around her, taking in Dolores' brown bikini, her glowing, olive skin. What was her name again? Nora didn't try to fill the silence. There was the laughter of seagulls, the distant bark of a dog, the acoustic drum of feet running down the boardwalk. They trudged across the beach, maneuvering their way around buckets and sandcastles, in search of a green umbrella. "There they are," said Dolores. Nora squinted and slung an arm across her brow. Antonio and Fabio lay stretched out on their towels beneath the umbrella, their pale thighs shining whiter than the sand. "Hey," said Dolores, squatting down and fishing a towel from her bag. Nora plunked herself beside Antonio and kissed his salty lips. "You've already been in," she said, picking the sand from his curly beach hair. He smelled of the sea, and she was happy here on his raggedy blue towel. Antonio nodded yes, scooting over to make room. Nora lay on the wet imprint and planted a kiss on the back of his warm, sweaty shoulder. "You brought a book," said Fabio, as Dolores pulled a green paperback from her bag. Fabio sat with his knees up about his chest, hugging his hairy calves. Nora ran a hand down Antonio's back as she zoned out. She ran a finger over his sunlit blackheads, over the black hair sprouting from his mole like a splinter. "So few people read these days," said Dolores. "They don't even know who Salinger is." Salinger with a hard G. Nora's ears pricked up. "Yeah, totally," said Fabio. "Salinger," said Nora. "The one about the kids on the beach and their descent into chaos? The one with the pig head?" "No, that was Lord of the Flies," but Dolores didn't reply. "And what about Camus?" she said. "If you read each sentence carefully," said Fabio, "it's really powerful." Nora couldn't tell if they were being ironic. They kept swimming around titles and exchanging generic comments. "I read Don Quixote in one afternoon," said Fabio. Nora almost snorted. It was definitely irony, but it was so elaborate you would think it were in earnest. "Yeah, I read it in an hour," she said. "Did you?" Nora blinked blankly like a goldfish. None of it was irony, and this realization formed above her like a storm cloud. She hadn't played pretend since high school and it all felt a little shallow. Or maybe she was just arrogant. Said Dolores. "I read it when I lived in Korea." "You lived in Korea?" piped Nora. "For how long?" 2 months. She'd said lived, hadn't she? When would the sky turn green? When would the umbrella sprout wings and fly away? Surely this wasn't real. Why were they trying so hard to be interesting? As though identity were contingent on a list of things they'd supposedly read and done. Nora was 26, she was above this, they all were. But maybe they were nervous. Maybe they sought validation. Maybe they didn't know they were safe here, that they could relax and be themselves. Or maybe Nora was too judgmental, that was probably it. "So, how's the beach house?" said Fabio. "Yeah, not bad," said Antonio, clearing his throat. "I've been getting up at 8:15 every morning." "Lie." Nora listened intently as she dug sand and sunscreen out from beneath her fingernails. "Nice," said Fabio, dusting sand from the bottoms of his feet. "And I sometimes go for a jog along the beach." "Another lie." "That body's not gonna maintain itself," said Fabio. "I know exactly what you mean," said Dolores, rising to her knees. "My ex said I had a fat ass." She smacked sunblock into her hands and rubbed it into her chest, her stomach, her thighs. "I'd put sunblock on my tattoo," she said, "but it's already ruined." Dolores crawled onto the edge of Antonio's towel and untied her bikini top. "See?" she said, cupping her bare breast in one dainty hand. Nora blinked once, twice, but didn't wake up. The sand was still white and the water still blue. Dolores poked at her tattoo as the men leaned in for a glance. It was on the rib beneath her breast. In Nora's world, she need only lift her bikini slightly to reveal that illegible blot. She almost snorted at the pretext. But mushrooms didn't sprout from the sand, her hands didn't melt, the sky didn't come crashing down. She reminded herself. "And this one," said Dolores, turning around to pull down her bikini bottoms. She was showing Antonio another illegible smudge of ink, while Fabio, the poor thing, alone on his towel, leaned over for a look-see. Nora expected cats to rain from the sky, for the seagulls to moo, for the sand to turn blue. Why were they all pretending this girl wasn't flirting with her boyfriend? It wouldn't surprise her if Dolores slipped and fell on Antonio's dick, the clumsy, little fawn. It was all quite slapstick, really, and Nora would laugh if she weren't in love, she'd laugh at the absurdity of it all, but she was very much absorbed in the nightmare and its nonsensical imitation of reality. Or maybe she was crazy. Who was this Dolores, anyway? Antonio had met her at a party a fortnight ago, but she was his friend, and friends were his priority, irrespective of whom he arbitrarily attached the label to. Nora was dizzy with dissonance, and it gripped her like seasickness. The dissonance always began with redefining and reframing. Nora, in pursuit of harmony, would acquiesce and negotiate her own perception, thus allowing Antonio to extrapolate these negotiated definitions/narratives into valid but generic statements. "Be nice to this girl I met at a party a fortnight ago," thus became, "You have to respect my friends." The latter, of course, granted him more leverage, and Nora was condemned to walk the plank if she dare question it. Her acquiescence, she would later realize, was just as much a pirate as his manipulation. She'd blindfolded herself. Or maybe she was delusional. Dolores remained on Antonio's towel as she readjusted her bikini and rubbed sunblock into her chest. It was okay, decided Nora. It wasn't Dolores' fault she was insecure, that she sought validation by pretending to have read a book she'd never read, to speak a language she couldn't speak, to have lived in a country she'd only ever visited. And when her attempts at intellectuality failed to garner the attention she craved, she'd resorted to her body. It wasn't Dolores' fault she was trapped beneath that suffocating mask, unable to acknowledge her genuine beauty, the beauty Nora saw in her plump, cherubic face, in her freckled, olive cheeks, in her veiled sadness and sense of inadequacy. "Yeah, I fuck whomever I want when I want," said Dolores. Had Nora zoned out? What was the relevance? The seagulls snickered. It was hilarious, really, or maybe Nora was hysterical, maybe she had too much water in her ears, and yet she hadn't been swimming. "Nora, you look tired," said Dolores. "We can switch to English." "I'm fine," said Nora. "It's just that Antonio kept me up all night." Whoops, she'd taken the bait. Fabio stared at her blankly. "Is she telling a joke?" "I don't know," said Antonio. Laughter. Nora grabbed a handful of sand, watched it trickle through her fingers. This was real, she wasn't dreaming, and she was drowning here on this raggedy blue towel amongst these faceless creatures. "My friends didn't vote," said Dolores. "Her friends didn't vote," Fabio said to Nora in accented English. "Just so she understands," he said to the others. Laughter. "Neither did my mum," said Antonio. "She's not a real feminist." This was the very man who had yelled at Nora just yesterday. He'd climbed onto the bed and into her space, enraged that she wouldn't engage. She'd cowered in the fetal position, eyes closed, elsewhere, somewhere far, far away from there. But Nora didn't think of that now, no, she dug more sand out from beneath her nails. Her mind had erased it to resolve the dissonance, for it was impossible to reconcile that man with this sweet and sandy boy who smelled of salt and sunscreen. Dolores rose from the towel and brushed the sand from her bust. "We're gonna go get beer," she said, looking at Fabio. He rose and trudged after her through the sand, followed by the swish of his board shorts. Nora watched as they entered the heat haze, shimmering like sparks of oil. "Wanna fuck in the surf shack?" said Antonio, rising from the towel. "No." "Sure," said Nora. Nora stumbled after Antonio and into the sunlight, readjusting her bikini as she trudged through the sand. The click of her flip-flops followed her, the alarm bells in her head booming like a conch shell. "Antonio," she called. "Why'd you tell them you get up at 8:15 every morning?" Pause. He didn't turn around. The click of flip-flops, a child's distant laughter, the thud of a volleyball. "I said wake up," he said. "Not get up." Pause. "And why'd you say that you sometimes go jogging?" Pause. Antonio dropped onto his towel beneath the umbrella. "I do," he said. "Sometimes when I come to the beach house, I go jogging." He was gaslighting her again. Or maybe she'd gone mad. Nora spread her towel out beside his, lay down and stared up at the leaf-green umbrella glowing in the sun. She imagined she was wrapped up in a great, big cocoon, that soon she'd emerge stronger, secure, sufficient. It was, after all, her fault. A sudden kiss on her cheek. Nora rolled over, and was met with those big, brown eyes. "You know I love you," said Antonio, propped up on an elbow. "I love you, too," said Nora, leaning in for a kiss. Her whole body eased into his snug and sunlit aura. She was safe here. This was the man she knew, the man she loved. He was the man smiling softly, sleepy-eyed as she dusted sand from his sun-kissed cheeks, from his beard. "Are we disturbing something?" called Dolores, cradling plastic cups and a big glass bottle of. Fabio lagged after her, balancing another 2 bottles, a bag of crisps, a tin of olives and a lemon. Sang his board shorts, rubbing between his thighs. "If we're disturbing something we can leave," laughed Dolores, dropping onto her towel where she began unscrewing a bottle. "This was the last lemon," said Fabio, kicking off his flip-flops. Dolores began pouring, the audible glug of beer filling the cups. "How much did it cost you?" asked Antonio. "An arm and a leg," said Fabio, ripping open the crisps. He emptied the olives into the packet and gave it a good shake. "Outside of Murcia, Lem." Dolores leaned towards Nora, and Antonio's voice faded into the background. "Here," she said. The foam kissed the lip of the cup, almost overspilling. "Thank you," said Nora. "Did you want us to leave?" "We can totally leave." "No," said Nora, smiling. "No, not at all. Maybe this girl wasn't so bad, after all. How could she be with those doe eyes, that sweet smile? Maybe it was all in Nora's head, maybe she was imagining things again." "The dad." Both men boomed with laughter, and their voices returned to the foreground. "Nora wants us to leave," laughed Dolores, returning to her towel, but both men were still shaking their heads and regaining their breath. Dolores handed Antonio a cup of beer. "Oh, none for me," said Antonio. "Not after that house party." "This one always has to pee," said Dolores. "You and Lucia in the outhouse." Nora's ears pricked up. "The door wouldn't close," said Antonio. "Toilet buddies," said Fabio, "like in primary." Antonio laughed. "The good O." "Remember when we had to take you to bed and undress you?" interjected Dolores. She glanced over at Nora. "It wasn't sexual, though. Hook, line, and sinker." "I was so Drew." Antonio's voice ebbed and flowed as Nora zoned in on Dolores. Dolores leaned back on her towel and crossed her ankles. The crisps packet rustled, and she popped a crisp into her mouth, crunch, then washed it down with beer. Nora knew she was above all this, above this topsy-turvy world, and yet tears began to swell in her eyes. Why was she here in this odd simulation of reality with all these faceless creatures? Rustle, crunch. Dolores smiled, her face split in two by the shadow of the beach umbrella. "I'll be right back," said Nora. She rose and dodged a sandcastle, a spade, a bucket. Dolores had endeavored to peel back her mask, scratch away another layer, but she'd found only flesh and blood beneath her claws. Nora hadn't worn a mask, and there was no room to be human here. Peals of laughter, the drumroll of feet against the boardwalk, a distant splash. Or maybe this was mania. It was always Nora's fault, after all. Nora stepped back out into the sun, the sand, the surrealism with itchy, pink cheeks and puffy eyes. She saw Dolores and Fabio in the distance, two glistening specks of oil. "What's wrong?" asked Antonio. She shook her head. She knew she couldn't tell him. She knew her feelings, when vocalized, triggered passive aggression, yelling, abandonment. She would just have to self-regulate. "Tell me," said Antonio, his hand on his chest. She couldn't, she knew she couldn't, and yet his brow wrinkled with concern, his voice pleaded, and she wanted to believe him, to believe that she was safe here. She burst into tears, relieved. "That made me feel insecure," she said. "What, that they treated me like a human being?" Nora paused. Blinked once, twice. She was so stupid for having expected comfort from this pig-headed boy, and 8 months of invalidation came crashing out of her like a wave. "Fuck you," she said between tears. "I hate you. What am I even doing here? What she doing here in this dreadful delirium with all these faceless creatures?" God, she was dizzy. Was it the heat? Did she imagine his mask scrunch up into a deranged mess of features? Did she imagine it split? Did she imagine that dark and miserable abyss through the rift? "Stop trying to make me feel guilty," he yelled, rising from the towel. Look what she'd done, and now he'd surely leave her again. Nora didn't hear much else. She tuned into the steady ping of a ball against paddles. She stared across the beach, at the rippling and shimmering figures beneath that burning heat mirage, at the glistening blue water flashing white beneath the sun. She registered the faces on the beach, the faces that turned to watch, a swarm of big, black sunglasses like flies' eyes. And they twitched, they vibrated, they buzzed amongst themselves. Leave. This brought her back, and she looked up at this snarling beast towering over her, his back arched as though to pounce. "You want me to leave?" said Nora. "Leave." And it ended as soon as it had begun. He straightened up, readopting the posture of a man. Nora watched as he stormed off into the heat shimmer, rippling, melting, and merging with the sand, with the other faceless creatures. She wasn't hallucinating, it wasn't the heat. She'd just seen evil possess this hollow shell of a man, the man she claimed to love, the man who claimed to love her. The lifeless swarm of fly eyes looked away and Nora didn't move. She sat there in the aftermath, in the ringing of her ears, in the thump of her heartbeat, in the screaming silence. She could hear the whisper of the ocean lapping the shore, the distant squeal of children, the sniggering seagulls. It was as though her ears were stuffed with cotton, as though it were all somewhere far, far away. Or maybe she'd imagined it. But the sand was still white, the water still blue, trees didn't sprout from her fingertips, the gulls didn't grow arms, the ping-pong paddles didn't speak. Again, Nora grabbed a handful of sand and watched it trickle through her fingers, just to be sure. One of the faceless creatures approached, trudging through the sand, rippling beneath the heat mirage. "Oh, Nora," said Dolores, dropping onto her towel. Nora doubted the kindness in her voice, the concern on her brow. "Did you want to talk about it?" A siren song. Nora distrusted those murky eyes. There was nothing there but the brown green of stagnant water. But nor did she trust herself, not after all the brain fog, the cognitive dissonance, this topsy-turvy world in which she knew not right from left, up from down, black from white. She was a fish out of water, gasping for the world she'd known, dying for that vast sea of beauty, for its depth, for its clarity. "I'm fine," she said, and smiled stiffly. She'd just have to adjust to the sun, the sand, the surrealism.